We're here. It's week 2, and there's a reason Devin is our fearless leader because he nailed it with Justin Fields last week. What are we going to give you this week for the DFS show coming up?
You're asking me?
Well, sure. Let's dive in. Let's look at
it's
last
McCorkle
week we
week.
did a little bit of. We're gonna have to reset, but all right.
Why do we have to reset?
Well, maybe we don't have to reset it. We're fine. Phil, last week we did some strategy session. Do you have any thoughts that you want to do a strategy session in terms of week 2, maybe bouncing off of week 1 and kind of coming into with some information now?
Yeah, I guess we'll hope that my strategy session isn't as horrid as it was in week 1, where all of those flimsy preseason narratives turned out to be super sturdy preseason narratives. Who would have guessed that Tyreek Hill and the Dolphins had terrible vibes and would be terrible? And Zach Charbonnet was actually a threat to Kenneth Walker. And even though Caleb Johnson was buried behind Jalen Warren, our old pal Artie Smith decided to give Kenny Gainwell some meaningful snaps. But as far as week 2 goes, we've got a whole week of data now, which is just enough information to make people dangerous out there because it's a big overreaction week. I always like to play last week's busted chalk in GPPs. There's plenty of it because last week was a low scoring week. And there's really no better week to do it than in week 2 because all anybody has is that 1 week sample. So hopefully luck is on my side this week.
All right, Devin. I know you're sitting back there with something that you want to say. Like I can see it on your face.
I already said it, but it's McCorkle week. Mac Jones.
Macaroni Jones. Week 2, and we are already on Macaroni Jones. So here we go.
Michael McCorkle Jones. Yeah, I mean, week 2 is always an overreaction week. We're going to talk about how Breece Hall is going to run for over 100 yards every single week and have 19 carries, and Travis Etienne's probably going to have a 20 carry week, even though he's going to have 12, and Tank Bigsby will get back in the mix. It's always an overreaction week, so just be careful, and just because something happened in week 1 doesn't mean it's going to happen in week 2.
I always think it's so wild. We go months of arguments and months of procrastination and everything, and we get to this point, and I was doing an underdog. Prognostication, Devin. Prognostication. And I was doing an underdog battle royale draft, and so that's like a snake draft. It goes, and you know how snake drafts work. But anyways, like Jahmyr Gibbs is falling to the end of round 2, and in that, and it's like, okay, here we are for an entire 6 months. If you would have taken him outside of the top 5, you were a crazy person. And then after 1 game, we're taking him at the end of round 2. But that's what we're dealing with here in overreaction season. But let's dive in. Let's look at the games of the week that we are targeting. And Phil, what games are you looking at this week?
Yeah, there's really not that many. We kind of have to go deep dive and to look for potential games that can snowball on offense for both teams. But I'd say it has to start with Jaguars at Bengals. Bengals are at home, 3.5-point favorites, over under 49.5. We're counting on those Bengals to look a lot better than they did in week 1 against the Browns. Eagles at Chiefs looks like a good one, 46.5-point total. Eagles are short road favorites, rematch of last year's Super Bowl. And I'd expect to see some scoring there, even though there's a chance that could go the other way as a defensive battle. Outside of that, you really don't have a whole lot. You have a lot of big favorites on this slate. I don't mind Bears at Lions. I thought the Lions at Green Bay last week was a pretty bad spot for them. And going home, coming off a loss, I like them against the Bears. And I thought the Bears were certainly uneven against Minnesota, to say the least. But there was enough there that was encouraging that I think they could kind of grow into Ben Johnson's offense, and Caleb Williams could settle down a little, and maybe we see some of that happen this week. But yeah, other than that, I'll talk about some potentially sneaky low-scoring games, I guess, as we progress through the different positions.
Devin, do you have anything else that you are looking at this week? I mean, you nailed it last week with Cedric Tillman play with the Browns. Are you going back with your Browns there at all against the Ravens?
I keep looking off. I have to turn this other screen off, or people are gonna lose their mind because I keep looking over to it, and my eyes are floating. I'm literally closing it out. Okay, there we go. I don't know how we don't go back to the Jets Bills, because it's only 45.5, 46.5, something like that. That to me is another target game. Justin Fields looked good. This offense looked much improved. Completely rebuilt team. I think that it's a scenario where, again, how do we think about overreacting, not overreacting? I think I saw enough, especially with some of the roster percentages, that Fields isn't getting a ton of love, and at 5,700, he's cheap enough to get there. Baltimore Cleveland is interesting. I think that what we saw last week was a lower scoring game than it should have been at 17-16. The Browns they outplayed Cincinnati in every facet of that game. I think Jerry Jeudy dropped 3 or 4 passes. Cedric Tillman dropped 1 or 2. But there's a lot of encouraging things out of Cleveland, and we'll talk tight ends this week. But Harold Fannin, I think, is going to be the chalk of the chalk plays at 3,100. So there's certain spots. There's not a game that I'm overly targeting, but I think that there's certainly some spots. But there's also concerns. I mean, Cincinnati, I'm very concerned about their offensive line. Amarius Mims can't play. He was a guy who played 8 games at Georgia, and because he's 6'8", 350, and had a ridiculous athletic score, jumped into the late first round, but he can't play. He was a turnstile, and going up against Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines, Allen, I don't know how they're going to protect Joe Burrow this week. So that's a concern for me. But I think overall, let's jump into quarterbacks and see where we land.
Yeah, absolutely. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. And feel free to comment with any questions, thoughts, concerns, or just a victory lap that you played Harold Fannin last week. But let's dive into your cash games. And we are proud to announce that Devin's Cracking FanDuel is 1-0 to start the season. And so make sure to check that out. And Devin will win you some money, ideally. And we'll go through our quarterbacks here, our cash game quarterbacks. We've already kind of danced around it a little bit with Mac Jones is sitting out there at a minimum price of 4,000, and we've also got you mentioned Justin Fields at 5,700. Is that where you're going, Devin, or are there other plays that you're looking at quarterback and cash game?
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking. It depends. I'm either going Justin Fields or I'm going Josh Allen at 7,000, and it really just depends on where I can get the value. We don't have the super expensive running backs as much this week. There's certainly some guys that are up there, but no one that I'm really targeting. But we also don't have the super low value that we had last week. So I don't know that I can get to Josh Allen, but I mean, Justin Fields looked plenty good enough that he's going to be more of the Chicago Bears Justin Fields, where he's running a lot more than the Pittsburgh Steelers one. So I'll start there. We saw what Lamar was able to do against Buffalo. And he didn't have the best game, but he still had a more than adequate game last week. So I think in order for the Jets to keep up, especially if their defense is giving up, 34 points to Aaron Rodgers, they're going to have to rely on Fields a lot this year.
Yeah, I like that you went there because I think unders, I believe they went 14-2 last week. The unders did. And so I'm curious if we've got offensives catching up or if we should just tap Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen at the top. But Phil, are you going a different direction with your cash game plays at quarterback?
Yeah, for me, it's going one of two ways. If I'm spending up, I actually prefer Lamar Jackson to Josh Allen, just because, and I guess this is anecdotal Jets fan stuff, but the Jets usually seem to have Josh Allen's number pretty good, where he doesn't put up ceiling scores, or he hasn't against them in recent years. Is Justin Fields going to put up the type of game that Lamar Jackson did from an efficiency standpoint? Certainly, he could do it from a rushing standpoint to make Josh Allen into the Josh Allen that we saw last Sunday night, where he has to play hero ball, which is what you want in fantasy. I think that's the Jets fan in me again, saying no. I don't think that the Jets offense is as good as it looked against Pittsburgh. We've seen flashes from Justin Fields before. I kind of need to see it again before I use him in a cash game. And I think for the safety that Lamar Jackson provides at 7,000, there's enough value on the slate elsewhere that you could fit him in. The Browns linebackers are solid, so maybe they could contain him in the running game. But they're also a younger group. They lost some veterans during the offseason, so it remains to be seen if their consistency is going to be there from week to week. And I'm just following the points. I mean, Baltimore is implied for 28.5. They're 11.5 point favorites. That usually points to a big game for the quarterback. And if I'm not going Lamar, then yeah, I'm using Mac Jones at 4,000. I mean, he's just a $4,000 quarterback. His median projection on DraftKings on our site is 16 points. So that's basically a median 4x projection that doesn't even account for the fact that he might have a good game. He wasn't terrible last year when he was pressed into duty for the Jaguars at the end of the season. He did have multiple 20-point games on DraftKings. He adds a bit of rushing between 17 and 29 yards in 3 of his last 4 starts. And it depends on how much you're willing to buy the Kyle Shanahan pet narrative. If you think he only needs a guy like Shanahan to unlock his potential, someone who he wanted to draft back when they took Trey Lance, then I could see it in the dome, matched up against a bad Saints defense that's going to run a lot of plays and maybe force the 49ers to play with a little bit more pace. You put him and a guy like Fannin in your lineup, and you could literally play everybody else that you want. So from a cash game perspective, I see it. And just because people will be hesitant because it's Mac Jones, I'm probably going to be doing it in some tournament lineups too.
You just want to yell who Mac Jones every time he does something good.
If you go that direction, it's really easy to put Christian McCaffrey and Ricky Pearsall in there with him too. I mean, that might be a little bit risky for cash, but at the same time, that's about all that he's got there to play with. Let's look at our running backs this week.
Can we talk about that for a second? Like, if you're going to do that, you might as well go all in because I think the strategy of if you're going to take Mac Jones, maybe not Pearsall, but I think for sure McCaffrey, and this kind of transitions into running backs because you're looking at 11.5 for the 2 of them. And if you get 21 points from San Francisco, you're probably getting 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
One would hope. And if they get 3 touchdowns, 2 passing, 1 rushing, that's 14 plus all the yards. Like I think it makes sense to play McCaffrey if you're going to go with Jones because it elevates that floor a little bit. And if Jones is terrible, then you're probably going to lose anyway.
Yeah, and it's if you were to flip it, if you were to look at it and what it's occupying in your lineup, it replaces the Josh Allen with the Christian McCaffrey, and then it would be like a Dylan Sampson or something like that. I mean, that's not an exact 1-for-1, but that's kind of what you're looking at to go that direction. But with running backs here, is Christian McCaffrey the play this week, or you go in a different direction, Phil?
Yeah, I'm definitely using Christian McCaffrey. He made everybody look silly for taking him out of their lineups last week. He ended up low owned in GPPs when in the beginning of the week it looked like he was going to be the chalk, but that injury appears safely in the rear view. He was back practicing fully today. No George Kittle, possibly no Jawan Jennings. It's going to be the Christian McCaffrey show, and last week he proved capable of carrying the same type of load that he did in the past. He was out there 75% of snaps. He had 10 targets, 9 receptions, 142 scrimmage yards, and he looked pretty good to me. He was forcing defenders to miss. So I'd definitely go back there at what I said last week was about a 25% discount. Now it's a little closer to a 20% discount off of his 2023 highs. And where I go at running back too is kind of going to depend on what I do at quarterback. I think if I were to spend up to Lamar Jackson rather than go to Mac Jones, I might look to Javonte Williams at 5,800. I'd have to kind of hold my nose while I'm doing that, but he has a pretty high floor in a game where Dallas is implied to score 25. They're a 4.5 point favorite over the Giants. Williams was out there for 80% of the snaps. He ran 22 routes. Of course, he scored twice last week. He's probably never going to be efficient, but I don't think he has to be to pay off $5,800 in that script. I think he's a little bit safer than some other guys in that range that also look like good plays, like maybe Travis Etienne. And if I were going with Mac Jones, I might play Chase Brown in cash because you'll have a little bit more money to get up to him. And we did see last week he had the role that everybody was hoping that he was going to have for the Bengals. Kind of had a floor game because the entire offense did. But, with the exception of losing a couple of pass routes to Samaje Perine, Brown is kind of McCaffrey of Cincinnati. And I think he's safe for cash games against Jacksonville.
Here I am saying don't overreact. And I'm overreacting. And I know I'm overreacting. Give me Breece Hall against Buffalo. I didn't see anything from Buffalo that gives me any level of confidence that their linebackers are any good. Matt Milano hasn't been the same since his multiple injuries. What is it? Tremaine Edmond? Who's their other linebacker?
Terrell Bernard. He's very good. Their safeties are.
He had a rough game last week, though.
The safeties are the problem. The safeties are horrendous. Taylor Rapp is too slow, and Cole Bishop doesn't know where he's going.
Yeah. So, okay, that makes me feel even better. So that if they get into the second level, it's a huge problem. I don't know. I think there's a floor there in a similar concept as playing the two 49ers, that if the Jets are going to have any level of success, then give me both of those guys. Look, it's risky, and I know it's risky because Breece Hall is expensive, but I don't think a lot of people are going to be on him. So I think that's a solid play. I do like McCaffrey. I just don't know that I can afford him. And then I don't like the West Coast going east thing. We saw New Orleans shut down James Conner last week, so that scares me a little bit. The big question heading into this week is really what is going to happen with Quinshon Judkins, because Jerome Ford can't play, and I've been saying it for 2 years. He's just not a capable running back in the NFL. And if that's true, Sampson caught a lot of passes last week. And if Judkins is going to be limited, I worry that he's going to have any involvement in the passing game, simply because he's been with the team for a cup of coffee because he hasn't had a contract signed. So I think Sampson could be probably more of a GPP play, but I think he's at least interesting. And then the last name I'll throw out there, I like Kyren Williams. I know he didn't have the biggest game last week, but Tennessee was absolutely torched by Denver last week. They allowed 133 yards on 22 carries. And Denver might have one of the worst rushing offenses in the NFL. So Tavondre Sweat, who is like a 370-pound defensive tackle, last year he was on the field for 70% of the snaps. This year, in week 1, he was only on the field for 35. So that was interesting, just because if he's not on the field, he's not eating up as much space. So I think Kyren Williams could be a decent play at, what is he, 6,300, and provide a nice little savings off of McCaffrey.
DeAndre Sweat's hurt, so he did not practice. He was injured in the last game. I guess, apparently, I don't know. I don't know. So we'll see if he's actually even going to be playing. So that leans to it a little bit too. But I do like that call out because we did see the usage is definitely there. I mean, that Houston game for the Rams, like that was a defensive battle back and forth there. So good call out there. Let's look into wide receivers here. And Devin, what are you looking for at wide receiver in your cash games?
I mean, I don't think I have the money to go with Cincinnati, and Cincinnati worries me just because throughout Zach Taylor's 2-10 in weeks 1 and 2 throughout his career, which like are 2-11, which is just like mind blowing that you can be that bad and still have a capable offense or capable team. Really, I think I'm going to start, and I think the chalk will largely be Calvin Ridley at 4,900. I know Cam Ward was bad, but I mean, this was week 1 of a rookie facing Denver, who Denver is, for my money, the best pass defense in football. And at 4,900, I think the price is simply too good. Keon Coleman, 5,100. He showed everything that you could hope for going up against a pretty good secondary. I mean, Baltimore has Marlon Humphrey and Jair Alexander, which like they were supposed to be one of the better secondaries with Kyle Hamilton over the top. So I'm a little surprised at what he did, and I wrote about it prior to week 1, was that there's a reason Buffalo didn't seem panicked about their receiver room. And I think that they know more about a Coleman breakout than the rest of the public does. I mean, Khalil Shakir is more of he has limits where Coleman could be that guy that really emerges as the number one. And then Hollywood Brown, 5,200. Who else are they going to throw to? I mean, unless Xavier Worthy plays, and if that case, you could look at Jackson Smith and Jigba at 6,000. But I think Brown, we saw a big game in week 1. He was hurt most of last year, so looking at him in week 2 is certainly an area that I'm going to go with.
So what are your thoughts there? Are you similar plays? Are you looking at other directions? I think those are really good call outs, Devin.
I think Jackson Smith and Jigba at 6K looks pretty good. Shout out to our guy, Dave Kluge, who he was really beating the drum for JSN leading into the season, talking about how Clint Kubiak likes to really feature his number one receiver. And that bared out. He had Smith and Jigba running all types of routes, peppered him with targets. It was a 56% target share, which is just a silly number. If anything was ever made for cash games, it's a guy that's getting targeted like that at all levels of the field. Justin Fields made the Steelers secondary looked a little suspect last week, so I'm not necessarily scared of his matchup. And for the price to only go up $200 after he posted 23.4 DraftKings points and what he did at the end of last season, I think he makes sense for cash. Hollywood Brown was another one on my list, like Devin said. I mean, I don't know that he'll get targeted 16 times again, but I also don't know that he'll be as inefficient on his targets as he was last week. He didn't clear 100 yards on 16 targets, which is almost hard to do. So let's say the targets come down.
Who else are they going to throw to?
Yeah, no one. So even if the targets come down a little bit, because 16 is a ton, the efficiency goes up and he ends up about where he did this past week, which is fine at 5,200. I would give some consideration to Brian Thomas in cash games at 6,700. Trevor Lawrence looked scary. Devin was right last week to ask me if I had watched him play in the last couple of years. I had forgotten what the Trevor Lawrence experience could be when it's not going so well. But I have to think that Liam Cohen's offense will settle in. It was the first game, and Brian Thomas Jr. is just too good to fail. I'm not worried about last week's 7 targets much.
He's a player. He's a player that I'm waiting on. And the reason I say that is like they're going to come out and they're going to want to feature Travis Hunter. Last year, Thomas didn't have to worry about any of that. And is there enough volume there at that price? Maybe there is, but is there enough volume at that price to support 2 receivers? I don't know. especially if Travis Etienne's getting the ball 19 or 17 times or whatever he got. Like,
I think it's predicated on how you're scripting the game. If the Bengals offense can't get on track, then you're probably right about the target squeeze. But if they force them into a shootout at home, I'm not too worried about it just because that defense is so bad. Last week, Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, Harold Fannin, Njoku, like all those guys were kind of fine. And Thomas is on a different planet in terms of talent. And just listening to Liam Cohen after the game too, when he was asked about Thomas's usage, it was very clear that the intention was to get him going. And like Trevor Lawrence just sucked so bad that it didn't happen. Like he missed him on
so bad.
Yeah, he missed him like 5 times. But I think the Bengals defense is that unforgiving that you could go to Brian Thomas. And then down in that same range as Calvin Ridley, Jeff mentioned Ricky Pearsall at 5,300. I think you could do that if you are playing a quarterback like a Josh Allen or a Lamar Jackson, because you don't want to go too heavy on the 49ers with Mac Jones. And I do agree that McCaffrey is the guy that belongs in the Mac Jones lineups. And other than that, same $4,900 price tag as Ridley is Chris Olave, who saw 12 targets last week, and we know is a talented receiver. Some of those targets, they're of the Spencer Rattler variety.
I'm not playing Trevor Lawrence and Spencer Rattler in the same lineup and relying on both of those guys. I might take a chance on one of them, but my God, like, I know you're a sucker for just like bad quarterback play because you're a Jets fan, but I mean, everybody has their limits, and you're just not as jaded as the Browns fan over here that is sick of horrible quarterback play.
You make a valid point, and we'll see. I thought Cam Ward was a little bit better than the stat sheet showed, and he was in a really tough spot. So Ridley's definitely got a higher ceiling, but I think that Olave's volume is sustainable. I don't think that 12 targets was like going to be his season high or something.
We're probably not there at. Go ahead, man.
I'm sorry.
No.
I said I was going to do that less this year, and I am failing. It's crazy that Trevor Lawrence's best year of football he's ever had was his freshman year at Clemson. That's all I got to say. Like, he hasn't improved.
Yep. Well, I mean, he was dramatically outplayed by Justin Fields on the same field 2 years in a row in the college football playoff. I'll just say that. So,
yeah.
The price might be a little bit much, and he picked up an injury, but Kayshon Boutte at 4,500. Do we want to see that again before we're thinking about there? Because going up against a Miami team that seems to be in 1-2-3 Cancun mode from the jump here, that looks pretty appetizing. But again, there's a level of risk there, and probably at 4,500, you'd like to see maybe that price be a little bit closer to 4,000 flat or underneath that, but. That's one I think on the radar.
Yeah, I think it's fine. I think it's more of a GPP play than it is a cash game play.
Let's look at tight ends.
I am with Devin on that just because I think that the Drake May stacks look pretty good in the projection so far. But Boutte could be for real.
Let's look at tight ends, and so that Devin can just wax poetic about Harold Fannin here, because I know he's been waiting the entire episode to get into it.
Yeah, what team is David Njoku going to be on by week 8? Because it's not the Browns. When they're 0-6, because they have the world's most difficult schedule. I mean, I look at other teams. I'm not going to get into it, but there are certain teams that have a incredibly favorable start to the season, and Cleveland gets to play Cincinnati, Baltimore, and then the entire AFC North or NFC North right off the jump. Anyway, Kevin Stefanski probably fired after week 6, but Fannon's he was, for those that don't know, he was unbelievable at Bowling Green. He was the best college receiving tight end last season. Tyler Warren got all the hype. Harold Fannin put up all the numbers. He's a third round guy because he's not a traditional tight end. He's playing more of a receiver role. But, I mean, Joe Flacco was targeting him an insanely amount of times that just, I think you have to play him at 3,100. It's a bad price by DraftKings. He should be low 4Ks based on what he did last week.
Yeah, I look at the board and it's either Harold Fannin or Trey McBride. I feel like with like almost nothing in between that, and even get up to Trey McBride, you're making a lot of sacrifices. You're doubling the salary basically on Harold Fannin. You could get the exact same production that based on what Harold Fannin did week 1. But Phil, do you see any other plays on this board for cash games?
Not really. It's Harold Fannin. I mean, I do have some questions about how sustainable it is with Njoku out there at tight end running more routes than him and seeing more snaps, and you got Tillman and Judy. I don't know if there's really not much of a reason to spend beyond 3,100 to Fannin, but Tyler Warren 4,500. The preseason buzz on him turned out to be really solid. They said that he was going to be a featured part of the passing game, and he came out with 9 targets, 7 catches, and 76 yards in his debut, 75% of the snaps, and ran the most routes behind only Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce for the Colts. They're going to continue to feature him. Didn't work out for me last week where I played a little Chigakonkwo, but I sometimes like to attack the Broncos with tight ends because their corners are so good that some of the passing production funnels to the tight end position, just historically with that defense, but that's kind of thin. I just think Tyler Warren is good, and 4,500 might be an okay price for him, but Fannin's definitely the better point per dollar value.
Is Travis Kelce going to have more commercials or more catches this year?
Commercials. But he might have touchdowns. So
I mean, 5K. It's like you guys are really trying to do something there, DraftKings, but I'm not biting.
All right, let's open up the board. Let's look at GPP plays. Let's give Phil the opportunity to talk about how he's going to have Trevor Lawrence in his lineup here this week, going up against the Bengals. GPP quarterback plays. Phil, what are you looking at quarterbacks here?
I might do a little Trevor Lawrence to myself again, only because I do like that game. I do like Brian Thomas. I kind of like Travis Hunter. So
you have kids.
I know, but it was remember our old friend John Lee said, if you like the pass catchers, you've got to like the quarterback. And a lot of times in tournaments, when that's the case, that quarterback, because nobody wants to play him, is going to be awfully, awfully low owned. And I think it's viable. I'm not saying he's like one of my top plays or anything, but I wouldn't laugh at anyone that played Trevor Lawrence in that game environment. My top guy for tournaments, who I think is going to get zero attention from the crowd, is Bo Nix. I think that Denver's offense is better than it showed in week 1. I think Indianapolis's defense is worse than it showed in week 1. And I'm willing to kind of put my money where my mouth is there. Nix has a high ceiling, 5 games with at least 23 DraftKings points last year. And I just see it as a get-right spot for the Broncos in a game that they win pretty easily, and that should bring Nix along for the ride because, as Devin said, their run game is kind of less than stellar. I think he said that earlier, right? Right.
Yep.
And then the other one was Joe Burrow, 6,800. I'm scared for a lot of the same reasons that Devin is scared. I'm just hoping that it could all come together in this spot. I like playing Burrow in tournaments. He's got a high ceiling, 4 games over 30 DraftKings points last year. We know that he could support multiple pass catchers in a stack. I still like the idea of playing him with Chase Brown, like I said last week. And I don't know. I'm just not quite ready to buy that the Bengals are so broken after one game that they can't be salvaged, and the defense is so bad it's hurting the offense, and all this kind of stuff that's kind of been in the mainstream on them.
Cool. You didn't take any of my guys, so that's good. Number 1, don't play Trevor Lawrence. If you like money, it's not going to win you any. Number 2, Joe Flacco, less than 1% rostered. Going back to Baltimore for the first time, we saw Josh Allen have a big passing game against Baltimore last week, and they're not going to be able to run the ball because Baltimore has the best run defense in football. The only way the Browns are going to keep up is to throw the ball. I feel like props, Joe Flacco, almost every week since he's been a Brown starter, I think he's like 13-1 on the over passing yards because they keep putting it at like 225, and it doesn't make any sense because he's throwing the ball 40 times a game. So that's 1. I think 2, get ready to throw up because I've been talking about bad quarterbacks and I've been talking about disasters. 2% rostered, $5,300, Tua Tagovailoa. Christian Gonzalez is out. We saw the Raiders throw the ball. Geno Smith, for God's sake, threw the ball 362 yards and a touchdown against this Patriots defense. This is kind of like a tipping point for Miami. If they don't show up at home against New England, they're gonna be in for quite the long season, and I think most people have just written them completely off, which I don't know that that's fair. The last name that I will throw out there at 5,400, because I think there's some interesting stacking combinations, is Caleb Williams going up against Detroit. I think that if there's a shootout game, he started 11 for 11 and then kind of went downhill against that Minnesota defense. Rome Odunze looked pretty good. DJ Moore always has upside. There's run back opportunities, especially if Detroit gets up early and they're forced to throw. So you could take a Jahmyr Gibbs and run it back with Caleb Williams. I think that's a solid option as well.
Caleb Williams was going to be my call out. 50 rushing yards last week. The ceiling is definitely there if the Lions offense figures it out. And you definitely know that Ben Johnson, if things are working, Ben Johnson is not going to be pulling up against what he could be doing against the Lions. I think Caleb Williams might be my favorite GPP quarterback play on the slate. And I do like the Rome Odunze combination last week. We saw Rome Odunze lead the team in targets, sitting at 4,900. We get the Monday night pricing benefit there a little bit, probably on Odunze. And then we also get we can have every single debate you want to have about Caleb Williams playing quarterback. We're playing fantasy football and we're trying to get points. And Caleb Williams' game plays very well into playing fantasy football and getting some points. Dak Prescott at 5,900 going up against the Giants. Dak Prescott, I think, has won 13 games in a row against the Giants. The Cowboys are going to want to bounce back here. The Giants, we saw the mess that Russell Wilson was at quarterback last week for the Cowboys. I mean, if you want to go into getting a CeeDee Lamb in your lineup, or if you want to go with a George Pickens, whatever it might be, but I think that Prescott could potentially open up some potentials there in GPP plays as well. Let's look at running backs. Phil, what are you looking at with running backs in your GPP plays?
Yep. First one is James Conner at 6,600 on DraftKings. I thought that a little bit too much got made of Trey Benson infringing upon Conner's role last week. It was more, I think, to do with Benson's good-looking 50-yard run than anything. Conner was still out there for 64% of the snaps, and in 15 healthy games last year, does anybody want to guess his snap rate?
It's like 60%.
64%. It's the same percentage as he played last week, and nobody had a problem playing him in good matchups last week. He also ran a route at a slightly higher clip than he did last year, and that was because Amari DiMercato never got in the game. Conner is the better pass catcher out of the backfield of Arizona's two backs, and if we needed a reminder about how bad Carolina's rush defense is, Travis Etienne is already being talked about as the steal of 2025 fantasy drafts after he broke a 70-yard run on them and went for 143 on 16 carries last week. So Arizona is one of the biggest favorites on the slate. I think they're favored by 6.5. That's a good game script for Conner. So if you give him the same work that he saw last week, I think he could do 100 yards and a touchdown with a chance at more. And then I'm going to go with Devin's guy, Kyron Williams, who we mentioned for cash games, for a lot of the reasons that Devin mentioned. That Titans defense that he's playing against this week, even with Denver's run offense kind of looking suspect, you still saw the 70-yard run from RJ Harvey, the touchdown run from J.K. Dobbins. So again, similar to Connor, Rams are implied to win by 6 points, score a solid 23.5. I think a good amount of people are going to be playing Puka Nacua in tournaments for good reason, but Kyron is probably a good way to cut that chalk.
Yeah, I mean, the only other names I have on my list, Jonathan Taylor, 6,700 at home against Denver. Will Daniel Jones be able to throw against Denver? I don't think so. Maybe I'm giving too much respect to Denver, but I think their defense is elite, especially against the pass. So I think that Taylor is always in play for a 100-plus yard game with multiple touchdowns, and he's coming in around 9% rostered at the moment. People are writing off Saquon a little bit at 8K, probably because of the pricing, and ownership percentage is really weird right now because Devon Achane is like popping off for some reason, and whether you believe that or don't, I don't really put a ton of stock into it. I think we see these types of guys who on Thursday are very highly rostered, and then by Sunday they're not. So I think he's probably going to fall into that a little bit.
Real quick, I think that this week's early week roster percentages are all jacked up because of the Mac Jones news, and some sites have accounted for that, some sites haven't, and most sites really haven't thought through the ramifications of what that's going to look like if a lot of people do end up playing Mac Jones. So the board is pretty wide open this week. There's a lot of ways you could build lineups, and that's actually a good thing for us playing GPPs. Sorry to
no, you're good. You're good. And then the last name I'll throw out there, I know he hasn't had the most success against Cleveland, and it's really going to depend on his roster percentage. But Grant Delpit made some safety for the Browns, made some comments this week about Derrick Henry being easy to tackle. And they have a rookie linebacker, Carson Schlesinger, and Schlesinger looked really good, but he's still a rookie. And he was going up against Chase Brown last week. Now he has to worry about Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Good luck. So I think that Henry could be a steal there.
Phil, you had a call out last week with Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard the Panthers game was a mess, but Chuba Hubbard still got his lion's share bell cow workload and was able to get into the end zone, score a touchdown. Looked even better in the passing game. I think Arizona, the way they want to play, they want to take the air out of the football, slow it down, which I think Carolina needs to be able to run the ball with Bryce Young. So I think that Chuba Hubbard there sitting there at 6,000 flat. Tony Pollard at 5,900. The Rams matchup is very difficult, but this is like every single snap goes to Tony Pollard, and every touch goes to Tony Pollard, basically, with Tajay Spears out of the lineup. That could be one where just on volume, and especially if he finds his way into the end zone in a time or two, that could end up being a pretty solid play. I mean, if you want to really go with the Miami give up, got Terry Henderson at sitting there at 5,500. He had 6 targets last week. That was a trailing script. I mean, maybe it is the Ramondre Stevenson with a blowout game there, but Henderson could be in play. And maybe in PPR formats, Jalen Warren with the Steelers at 5,400. I think the Steelers are going to be a very pass-heavy attack. I think the Seahawks are going to blitz the heck out of them, and Aaron Rodgers is going to be looking to dump the ball down. So I think that Jalen Warren in PPR could get his way there for a little bit of a decent day as well. Let's look at wide receivers. And Devin, what do you got on wide receivers?
Yeah, favorite guy of the week is Garrett Wilson, 6,500. Played college with Justin Fields, certainly looked like it last week, 105 yards or 95 yards and a touchdown. Not a lot of people are going to play him because of the price, but if Justin Fields has a stackable partner, it's going to be Wilson. If I look at, I think Keon Coleman, again, for all the reasons I said, Hollywood Brown, same thing. Devontae Adams is interesting at 59 if you don't like Kyron Williams. I think he's a nice pivot off of Puka Nacua, who's going to be the more popular player, but certainly he has the upside. If you want to go really cheap, Elik Iomanor, 3,200 from Stanford, rookie. Most people don't know who he is, but he had the best game in college against Travis Hunter of any wide receiver when they faced off. So he certainly has the talent. He's a little bit raw, but could have some upside. And then Roma Dunze, like I mentioned, I think is in a really good spot this week as well.
Phil, what do you got?
Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, I think he showed enough last week to have at least some intrigue going forward.
All right, so my guys, I'm going to start with George Pickens at 5,800. This one might be a little bit flimsy, but I was impressed with how well Paulson Adebo played last week on Terry McLaurin, and maybe some of that was rust on McLaurin's part, but they gave him a big contract in free agency. He followed McLaurin around the field. He put the clamps on him. The result was a big Deebo Samuel game. And I'm not trying to overreact, but Adebo is going to be following CeeDee Lamb around this week. And Pickens is a talented wide receiver too, just like Deebo Samuel was. Jeff mentioned Dak Prescott, who I thought played a lot better than his numbers suggested last week. And who knows, maybe Pickens read some of the clippings about how he quit on a bunch of his routes again, and he'll realize that he really shouldn't be doing that in a contract year, and he'll want to come out and make a statement. I'm not really holding my breath on that one, but I see it as a good spot.
George Pickens having mental tantrums on the sidelines? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, it never happens. DJ Moore, 5,600. Again, Jeff mentioned Caleb Williams. Moore survived a big hit late in that game Monday night. He looks on track to play. And he just traditionally gives the Lions fits in these division games ever since he's been in Chicago. And for all the reasons that Jeff mentioned, Caleb Williams could be a good play. Moore certainly looked like the more featured player in the offense. He was getting carries. His salary is great. Cortland Sutton, 6,300. I had mentioned Bo Nix. There are really no other Bo Nix stacking partners you could feel great about because Sean Payton takes them off the field every other play. He's just rotating these guys. So I like Nix as a standalone. I like Sutton as a standalone. I like him in Bo Nix stacks. But I also like the way that, and this is part of the reason I like Bo Nix, you could double stack him, and the other guys that you would do it with have big playability. They're super cheap, and they're literally going to be 0% owned with like a $3,700 Troy Franklin or a $4,100 Marvin Mims. If they do get behind that Indianapolis secondary, which I think is a big weakness, it's kind of likely that it could be one of those guys, and then Sutton gets there on volume, and that's how Nix ends up having a big game. So I've been telling myself that story. And in the spirit of last week's busted chalk being the theme that we opened the show with, how about Jamar Chase, who had one of the worst games I could ever remember him having last week in a spot where he was pretty popular. He's still the guy who was the undisputed number one pick in fantasy football like 2 weeks ago. So if you think Joe Burrow bounces back, then you have to think that Chase goes along for the ride.
Aaron Rodgers, next touchdown pass, ties Brett Favre for the all-time touchdown, for fourth all-time on the all-time career touchdown pass list. They play Seattle on Sunday, and Aaron Rodgers' new favorite target is DK Metcalf coming over from the Seahawks. I mean, you could be looking at the most vengeful touchdown of all time with Aaron Rodgers either tying or breaking Brett Favre where his standing, going to DK Metcalf against his former team, Seattle Seahawks. I like that play there at 5,900. Zay Flowers hasn't been mentioned yet. 6,200 Zay Flowers. And we saw last week that he just had a massive game and they only targeted Zay Flowers. And I think the pushback is on Zay Flowers has always been, well, Lamar doesn't throw the ball enough. and they spread the ball around, so the volume just can't be there. And what if we just have Zay Flowers has arrived as the true number one receiver for Baltimore, and they're just going to treat him like a number one receiver, and he's going to get all of Lamar Jackson's targets, and going up against the Browns team that can be exploitable when it comes to some areas. I mean, the Browns defense is probably the best part of their team, but I like that one as well. And then that same game, I think Devin was on it. Great call out last week. I was on Jerry Jeudy. Devin was on Cedric Tillman. And looking back at the games that Cedric Tillman has been active, he has been the better play than Jerry Jeudy. Still sitting at 4,300, chasing in that game. I like that as well. Tight ends, we've already kind of touched on the tight ends on the overall. I mean, we know we've got Harold Fannin and we know we've got Trey McBride. Are there other options here, Phil, that you're looking at tight ends in GPP plays?
Yeah, there's just one that I wanted to call out, and that was Hunter Henry at 4,000. I was interested to see how Henry was going to be utilized because last season he was kind of the security blanket for Drake May. He had a ton of targets, and I wasn't sure if that would continue with the changes that they made on offense, and it continued with the changes that they made on offense. He had 8 targets. He's been a solid red zone guy throughout his career. Somebody earlier mentioned that they're playing against the Miami defense, who allowed Daniel Jones to kind of possibly resurrect his career last week. So if they're as bad as we think they are, then May stacks with maybe Kayshon Boutte, who we talked about. Throw Hunter Henry in there at 4,000. May is only 5,200. You're spending such a low percentage of your cap. And if they allow May to do things like Daniel Jones did to them, that could definitely be a tournament-winning combination.
You got a gem for us, Devin? Or
not really. I mean,
already.
Yeah, I don't really have anything. I'm just playing Harold Fannin.
All right.
I mean, the argument is like maybe you just switch to David Njoku because a lot of people are going to be on Fannin. So there's no guarantee there. I mean, Njoku's only 4,400, and I know I'm talking a lot about this game, but I like the passing side of both angles here. You could take a shot on Travis Kelce, but the problem is he's going to be the most rostered player at the tight end position this week as of Thursday. So if that's true, I have no interest. You know what? Give me Dalton Kincaid. I think it goes back to the whole mindset that I have that Buffalo knows something as a reason why they didn't go out and get another receiver, like an alpha receiver. And it's either Kincaid or it's Coleman. I like Coleman and Cash, but I think Kincaid could be a guy that as a GPP could sneak up there.
I mean, alpha receivers they can't exactly go to Costco and get an alpha receiver. So that
could have got Devontae Adams though, like for not that expensive.
Yeah, but he might. I think there was some arrangement there already that he was going to be a Ram. I tend to believe that, but he probably wanted to go live in LA to close his career instead of going to live in Buffalo to close his career. But
they could have got somebody for a second or third round pick. I'm convinced of that. Yeah, like they could have probably got Garrett Wilson.
They could have got George Pickens if they wanted to. Right. So, yeah,
but they didn't do anything, and that like they didn't draft a guy. It just tells me
signed Josh Palmer. What do you mean? Yeah. First day of free agency, they went out and got Josh Palmer.
That's why
Toronto native.
He's a number 4. Like, I just think that it's more of a trust the franchise type thing where I believe that they know what they have.
Yeah, I get you. Brendan Strange at 3,600. I think playing on that Jacksonville side, I don't know. I saw Liam Cohen noted that Travis Hunter might play a little bit more defense. And then there was some talk on NFL Network radio about Pat Kerwin had a good point about playing primarily a defensive game or primarily an offensive game for Travis Hunter because the in-game adjustments are so important that if you're trying to go both ways and pulling him in and out, that you're missing all those adjustments. So coming into the game with the dedication on one side of the ball and the Bengals with their wide receivers might be a matchup for him to go on the defensive side of the ball. Brenton Strange was, 4 targets last week, the leading yardage receiver for the Jaguars. And so playing that opposite side of the Bengals, I mean, I'd be remiss not to mention the game that Juwan Johnson had. Juwan Johnson's had some pretty solid games playing with Spencer Rattler. And I mean, that could be chasing there. We saw what Jackson Smith and Jigba was able to do against the 49ers last week, and they knew every single ball was going to Jackson Smith and Jigba, and he still did what he did against them. So I think that's going to be an open question on how good that 49er defense is. Let's look at our favorite stacks of the week. Devin, I'm going to let you go first this week on your favorite stack of the week.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about it. I mean, I have 2. I have Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, and then Justin Fields and Garrett Wilson. If I want an under-the-radar one, I mentioned it a little bit, but Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill. I know that I know, but I still am not going to overreact based on, 1, they're still professional athletes. 2, I think there's still some talent left down in Miami.
Phil, what do you have for your stack?
Well, let's see. I mentioned Drake May with Butte and Henry. I mentioned Bo Nix and his guys. Why not go for it with the highest total game on the slate? Give me Burrow, Brown, and Chase as a big bounce back game where Cincinnati erases some of the doubts. Run it back with Travis Hunter, who's cheaper and should be less popular than Brian Thomas. And I kind of like his shiftiness against the Cincinnati defense. He could have had a bigger game last week. Travis Hunter could have. And I think against this defense, it's possible that some of those connections hit.
I can't believe I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the cheese. I'm going to take the layup here. I'm going to take the Mac Jones, Christian McCaffrey, and I'll sprinkle in Ricky Pearsall as well. You got to bring back. Maybe you want to do a Rashid Shaheed, hoping he hits a big play. If you want to do Juwan Johnson as a bring back, there's a couple options in that Saints there if you want to have a bring back, but doing a little, and maybe you want to throw Jake Tonjes in there just for the heck of it and say that because there's nobody else for the 49ers to throw the ball to at 3,200 for tight end. But no, I think that Christian McCaffrey taking the cheese on the 4,000 quarterback with Mac Jones. And then I do think that Ricky Pearsall, we saw Mac Jones and we just talked about Brian Thomas, but Mac Jones was the reason why Brian Thomas became a thing over the second half of last year. So I think that he does have the ability to get it to his primary receiver. Phil, let's look at our favorite discount plays. And what are you going to go with your favorite discount play?
Yeah, Devin actually stole my thunder on Alec Ayomanor at 3,200. And, it's not like some insane play where the projections are making him jump off the page. But when you take a look under the hood of what he did as a 4th-round rookie last week against a tough Denver defense, 82% of routes, 25% of targets, 47% of air yards, would have had another 23-yard catch on the stat sheet if his head coach knew what the rules of professional football were. And I just want to see what that usage looks like against a defense that's not Denver. Devin mentioned he was a good college receiver. He had solid production at Stanford. He's super athletic, which is something that I like. And it's going to happen sooner or later, so you might as well make it happen while you're a week ahead of everybody else when they're still trying to figure out how to pronounce his name. Not that I know if I just pronounced his name right, but eventually he's going to be a thing by the end of the year. So try to get out in front of it.
Dave and I have a running gag that I can't pronounce any names right. So in my mind, you did it right, but that is a running gag. So Devin, what do you got for your favorite discount play?
It's gross. Juju Smith-Schuster, 4,000. Went 5 for 55. 5 for 55 last week. Hollywood Brown getting all the love at 4,000. If he goes 5 for 55, finds the end zone, maybe it's taken him a decade to learn the Chiefs playbook. But who else are they going to throw? Do I trust like a 37-year-old Travis Kelce or like a TikTok star in Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, the answer is neither of them, but then Hollywood Brown could get hurt very easily during the game. And now you're like stuck with one of these guys having to have a good game and give me Juju, I guess. I don't know. My brain is mush.
We're gonna be gross. This is what we're doing. We're playing gross. We're talking gross plays. This is our favorite discount of the week, and I'm gonna go with Olamide Zaccheaus for 3,600 with the Chicago Bears. There, second most targets for the Bears last week. Kind of the quote unquote supposedly the slot role, Amon-Ra St. Brown role in that offense. There, he's there, and he got more targets than DJ Moore. And in a potential shootout that I do like the pieces of with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze. You can go bottom of the barrel, and I don't know where the ownership's going to land on that, but 3,600 with Zaccheaus. That's all we got. Devin, you got any kind of parting words of wisdom? Tell people to follow your Cracking FanDuel. Anything else you want to add?
No, I mean this week it's let's just eliminate hate. Let's just love each other. Like, stop shooting each other, please.